Hey everyone, welcome to a TopSoil podcast. Mitchell Hora here with you. Excited to kind of have a little bit of a different angle to our topic here today, and something that I think I'm gonna have a lot of fun with. And uh, I think a lot of you guys will enjoy this conversation too, and just something that I think everyone should be aware of. A topic in a group that I'm new to, so I'm excited to learn more myself, but also, share the message with you all here as well. And we're going to talk today about sharing the farmer story and farmers being advocates for themselves, for their industry. And we got Mary here with us that is an expert in this for sure. So I'm excited to dig in with that. Just to tee things up a little bit for anyone that's new to Continuum Ag, I'm the founder and I'm seventh generation farmer in Southeast Iowa. And Continuum Ag is a software company helping 1 million farmers improve their profitability via improving their soil health. And our key way that we are going about that is helping farmers monetize their carbon intensity and manage their data where they own it. They really control that narrative and control that story. Like I said, that's what we want to really talk about here today. So Mary's with a group called the Global Farmer Network. I'm a new recruit. I was just inducted in June into the Global Farmer Network. So we want to talk about that, but want to really, again, a key piece of why I want to have Mary on here as we were brainstorming for, what topic should we do is, again, it's about telling that farmer story and farmers being able to come together and create something bigger than themselves. And I think with this carbon intensity thing, or just with sustainability in general, with American ag, American biofuels in general, we're competing on a global scale. And we're competing, and we got to tell our story with the consumers that the farmers are less than what now, 1% of the population, less than 2% of folks involved in ag or whatever. Like, we got to tell the story to our fellow Americans. We got to tell the story to our policymakers. We got to tell the story on a global scale to be competitive. And it all starts on the farm. And I think what's so cool is a lot of people are very interested in our stories as well. And we'll share some of that here of farmers that have been able to connect with consumers, and consumers are very interested in this stuff. But obviously, we have to portray our message in a way that is open and inclusive to those folks. So I'm excited to talk about that. But um, Mary, why don't I let you? I'll turn it over to you. Why don't I let you introduce yourself? And yeah, thanks for being on here today. After all of us were up watching our TVs last night.
We're a little tired.
But maybe introduce yourself. Let's see, what do I got
There you go.
next? Yeah,
Perfect.
why don't introduce yourself and tee up Global Farmer Network. I'm excited to just have a conversation with you. Anyone, as questions come up, put them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and looking forward to having a conversation here. But Mary, thanks for taking the time as well. Floor is yours.
Fabulous. And Mitchell, thank you for the opportunity. I love that. And I have to say, I just saw in your first little slide by farmers for farmers. And one of the big pieces of the Global Farmer Network, foundational, it's farmer led, farmer driven. And I
Mhm.
think that is what separates us from every other group that's out there. Lord knows I belong to a lot of commodity groups. We all do. And we're all finding that space. But they tend to be because we're busy and you are farming. It's we depend on staff, et cetera. But I think what's core is lifting up that farmer's voice, talking about what you do, why you do it, and whom you do it for, starting with our own families and communities and building out the world. So I'm Mary Boote. I actually grew up on a dairy farm in Northwest Iowa, Sioux Center, actually.
Sioux Center,
And
yeah, yeah. I
so
was gonna ask.
farming runs deep in my roots. And I really had a propensity for farm ag policy. And
Mm.
it's one of these things that people will say, well, why? And I can't tell you. But I think there are things in our lives that really interest us. And so I've been involved in the political process and the policy process at many different layers. I was I was the first female county farm bureau president for the state of
Mm.
Iowa a long time ago.
So wait, hold on. So you're the first, you say you're the first county farm bureau president for
for
your
the
county?
state of Iowa.
Really?
Yeah.
So, because my grandma Celeste must have been right about the same time as you then. So,
Absolutely. I knew your grandmother very, very well.
Yeah. So
And
you guys would have had to have been right about that same type of time frame. That's super cool. I
in
didn't
the
know that.
80s, like
That
70,
is
I was the
awesome.
president in the 80s. And yeah, and it was,
That's so
but
cool.
we were growing up in a time where there was Farm Bureau, and then there was the Women's Farm Bureau kind of auxiliary.
Okay.
And there was a sense that we need to be talking together. So even then, we were understanding the importance. And I think it was true then. It's clearly true now as well that farmers, family farms, which is the largest majority, not just in the US, but globally as well. It is a family business. It's
Yeah.
not just a person. It takes everybody to do that. So I'm going to let you move the slides and let's talk
Yeah.
about who and the why. And so just very quickly, the Global Farmer Network is farmers. They are all actively engaged in farming. We are influencers like you, Mitchell. You're talking, you're telling your story. And I'm thinking when you talk about the power of your story, why that's important is because your story is irrefutable. It's your data. It's what happened to you. It's your expertise. It's your experience. And people can question and they can disagree, but the reality is it's there. And I think that's the power of why this matters. And we collaborate. We work with partners. We work with other farmers. We work with agribusinesses who support, who we need. We also work with those who are making the policy and regulate us. And so clearly, as you're working in that carbon space, it's not just saying, here we are, and then waiting to react. It's collaborating with them as decisions are being made so that that input and impact happens from the very beginning, as opposed to just at the end when you're left to react only.
Yeah.
So next
So
slide.
you just so struck something there. So with telling your own story, it's your story. Nobody can argue with it. Is
Exactly.
something I've been working on the book 15
Ah,
the conscious leadership 15 commitments of conscious leadership and was just on a workshop and retreat working on that those commitments. And one of the items is as you're speaking like and having candid conversations, being able to speak in irrefutable language, I think is the way that they call it. It's the exact same thing that
it's
you
the
just
same
said. And
word
it's
that
kind
I
of,
use because you can't argue against somebody else's
yeah,
personal expertise. You might not agree, you might have your own, that's fine, but this story is yours.
yeah. You can't argue against somebody's how they feel about themselves or how they are approaching something rather than just speaking broadly or speaking based on projecting opinions on everyone else. You can have your own opinion and that's irrefutable, but projecting an opinion for other folks, that's
Exactly.
going to be debunked all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Next.
So in the but so the in remind me, so obviously the whole group is farmers, and
Mhm.
that's a mandate of the board and stuff too, I believe, right?
Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
started by 5 Iowa farmers and and the basis for that was, and I'll tell a little bit of the story if that's all right with you.
Mhm.
So the Global Farmer Network really was started by 5 Iowa farmers with no concept of us being here at this time. It was in reaction to something that happened on the ground in the United States that put a lot of concern in their heads. And again, Farm Bureau members, these are corn growers, this is NCGA leadership, this was cattlemen's. They were very well grounded, but we watched the World Trade Organization met, and you can take that, there you go, met in Seattle, Washington in November, over end of November, beginning December of 1999. And it ended up into a huge battle. And it became known as the Battle of Seattle. It's the first time that global meeting, which is focused purely on free trade movement between countries, coming up with a set of laws, a rule of laws that we all agreed to that would allow trade to move back and forth. And that meeting blew up. There's lots of stories about the how and the why, a lot of money trails, very few people who really finance that. But at the end of the day, why that particular meeting incented what is now the Global Farmer Network was how it was reported.
Yeah.
Everything from President Clinton, who was president at the time, to the national media, to the global media, saying maybe we need to relook at trade,
Mhm.
global trade. Maybe we need to look at more at self-sufficiency. And these are 5 Iowa farmers who are well connected, not just across the state, but nationally and internationally as well, saying Iowa is landlocked. We are extremely productive. 95% of our customers aren't just outside of the borders of Iowa, they're outside of our country. And when you have our president and And the media saying maybe we should relook at this, that is a challenge to our viability, to our sustainability, both economically and on every other level. And yes, we're Farm Bureau members. Yes, we're corn grower members. Yes, we're pork and cattle producer members. We all had really good platforms that were pro-trade, but for some reason we need to stand up and say, why does that actually matter? It's more than just a platform statement. This matters to our lives, not just to our families, but to our rural communities, our school systems, the main street, everything, that the financial institutions. So these five, and they've taken me along for the ride since February of 2000. We just said there needs to be a place, and I'm quoting one of the farmers, and they're all Iowans, and some of you may recognize the names. It was Bill Northey, who's now unfortunately no longer with us. He had just come off president of National Corn Growers Association. Craig Lang, who was then the vice president of Iowa Farm Bureau, moved on to be president and other things. Reg Claus, who was with the Cattlemen's Association, he remains on the board. Tim Burek, corn producer out of Northeast Iowa. He was U.S. Grains Council, corn growers. Bill Horan, Rockwell City, corn growers, so many different spaces. These guys said, we need to just find a place where we take off every other hat that we wear, all these things, and say, as a farmer, trade is important, and this is what it looks like. There was no other mission. There's no big focus group, anything. And 25 years later, we are still doing the same thing. So it remains farmer-led, farmer-driven, but they're very important. So we've grown now from 5 farmers in Iowa who said, this is important, to 279 members now out of 67 countries, 6 continents. And I will tell you, Mitch, that what you said very early on is exactly the reality, that we are not here in this little bubble by ourselves.
Yeah.
When I was growing up on that Northwest Iowa dairy farm, corn, alfalfa, sorghum, almost all of the grains that we grew on our farm went to feed the livestock. It was a huge value-added space, right? Yep. And if there was extra, my dad would have brought it to the cooperative downtown Sioux Center, Iowa, which he was a member of, and he was on their board as well. But we didn't think about what was going on in Japan. What was the EU thinking about? We didn't think about it. It felt close. It was almost like a closed circuit. We know today that is not the case. And that what happens to the yen in Japan is going to directly impact what the price is and what the opportunities, what stocks our country holds is going to directly impact the ability to move it to places where it needs. Cargill has a line that they've used that I always have thought, trade is the power to move from areas of plenty to areas of scarcity and need. And I think that is a rule of law and of how we live our lives. And it's so important for this process. And so we need farmers to talk about what they do. And in our world today, I'll also say, my grandparents, in fact, my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, emigrated from the Netherlands in between World War I and World War II, all farmers. Right now, I'm one of 4 children. My dad still asks me what I do. And I say, well, to a point, I'm still farming. But in reality, none of us are on the farm. And I have 2 children. I have 7 grandchildren. None of them are directly involved in agriculture. So as we have less and less of the world population, at least in the US specifically, US, and I'll throw in Europe, Canada as well, as less of the population actually understands, has an opportunity to see what's happening on the farm, it becomes even more important for us involved in agriculture to tell your personal stories, to make it relative to them.
So maybe you're going to get to it, but stop me or we can skip to different slides. But yeah, it started as this trade component, but it's definitely shifted to what you were just getting to there. That it's now much more holistic than only focused on, hey, how do we make sure that we do have trade and we're thinking about a global scale. So maybe explain that shift, or if it's coming.
No, it's very good. And you can take it to the next slide because it's got our mission on there. It's amplifying the farmer's voice and promoting trade, technology, sustainable farming, economic growth, and food security. The 5 pillars that not only we as agriculture grab onto. So last night was election night in the United States. In year 2000, and some of you probably too young to remember this, it was the year of the Chad. It was Al Gore and George Bush fighting. And we didn't have an answer on that election until well after election night. But the reality is Charlie Cook, who remains a very viable and well-respected political analyst, said in probably May, June of that particular election year, 2000, that it was likely that the election was going to be decided in the corn states. And he used those terms, corn states being Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Iowa, taken right across the Midwest. And so this is 2000, 1999, 2000. And we're in 1998. The Europeans, for the first time ever, banned the use of GM technology. Only one product had been approved. It was the BT corn that came out of Monsanto. Everything else that was put together had been denied. And so at that time, we invited Dean Kleckner, who another Iowa farmer. He had just left the presidency of the American Farm Bureau, well-respected, well-known, and said, here's our opportunity as farmers. Someone has indicated that the politicians are basically going to be coming to you as corn farmers across this country and saying, I want your vote. Yeah. As a voter, you have the right to say, these issues are important to me. What is your position? Not Republican or Democrat, but looking specifically at the issues. One of them was trade promotion authority, the ability for the government to negotiate and to approve trade agreements. But the acceptance of biotechnology and some of the other technology pieces was also clearly in the hands. And so we created a voter guide, nonpartisan, issue specific to agriculture at that time, put it in Dean Kleckner's hands and sent it to every farm show from Pennsylvania, Farm Progress, Nebraska Husker Days, every single one of them, and just talked about why, as a citizen and as a farmer, you have the right to ask these things. And so the technology space really became very important. And I think a lot of people may or may not have realized it, but that timeline allowed us to talk about how trade and access to technology are so intricately connected.
Sure. And so yeah, it was being able to, okay, here's that voice of, but it was about education and awareness too,
Absolutely.
not just trade. That was the key of it was, it's not just, hey, we want to be able to trade with the EU, but they need to be educated about what we're trying to sell them because they are banning these products and stuff. We got to educate them about what we're trying to sell.
Perfect. Absolutely right. And what we found out through the process is it wasn't just the Europeans we needed to educate. We needed to educate and talk about with our neighbors, with the school teachers who were in our classrooms, with our children, to those who were in the entertainment industry. We live in a world right now where athletes, entertainers have a lot of clout with the voters. And when they have an opinion and people say, well, if it's good for them, it might be good for me. All of these issues, we're really looking for who are our partners in talking about this and how do we do that? And we said, first, it has to be farmers. We have to make sure that as farmers, we're speaking with one voice. It's a theme that we utilize through the Global Farmer Network. We didn't think about it so much those early days, but we found out very quickly how important it is to not be talking all about our individual things, but to find those pieces in agriculture that connect us, that we all agree to. If you were in an ag business, it would be the pre-competitive issues, right? There are some things that are always important. And then connecting. And I think as we've continued to grow the Global Farmer Network, the power of connection, the power of convening, bringing people together to share their personal stories, having a global perspective on agriculture. I'm looking at the photo there and I'm looking at these names. There's David Danio, he's in the Philippines. We've got Rory Christie, he's farming in Scotland, and Jenny Holterman's in Canada, and Mario Corpez is in the Philippines. There's Pacifica, he's in Rwanda. You look at all these voices there. Everyone in this slide is a farmer. They have very unique perspectives and paradigms, but at the end of the day, what they're doing is important for the rest of us. It's feeding their families, their communities, the world, and they're producing produce that's important to others as well. And how do we help them get it from areas of plenty where they're producing it to areas of need And by the way, what are the technology tools that they need to access? What are those next steps that they need in their farm that will help them become sustainable?
Yeah. Yeah, more holistic to move everybody forward.
Yes.
Although it started here like, hey, how do we move Iowa and America forward? But it's very much grown to well beyond that of getting all these different voices brought together, way beyond what the original mission was.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but so, and I think getting into that now, but how did that change and what happened there? When did that occur that the decision was made? And I'm assuming a conscious decision, maybe not, maybe it just naturally happened to go from, hey, we started with a group of, small group of farmers in Iowa. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, a conscious decision had to be made of, are we going to go beyond Iowa, but also beyond the US?
And there were very clear moments.
Yeah.
That 2000 election when Dean Kleckner went across the country. Um, Again, several pieces. He had just left the presidency of the American Farm Bureau, so he had really good connections across the United States of leading farmer voices, who he felt would be well aligned with why trade is important, and he recruited them. And so that very early, we can't be just talking about Iowa. That's where it started, but we don't own this thing. It's much more important than us. We are part of something bigger than ourselves. The global piece was fascinating. And again, it has an Iowa roots. The World Food Prize, the Borlaug Dialogue, which we just celebrated this past week in Des Moines and in the state of Iowa, had been brought back to Iowa by Dr. Borlaug was still alive at the time, and Ambassador Ken Quinn was leading it. And here they were focused on bringing world researchers in agriculture, presidents and regulators and everybody into the state of Iowa. You've got this globally recognized meeting, a global prize, the Nobel Peace Prize for Agriculture, as it's been defined. And we would go to these meetings. Dean Kleckner at that time was also on the advisory council for the World Food Prize, so he was connected within that space. And Dean and I would go and we would say, but there are no farmers in the room.
Yeah.
You are talking about food security, you're talking about food production. They were just starting to use the word sustainability. No farmers. How can you talk about food without a farmer in the room? And we raised that question to Ken Quinn, to Ambassador Quinn, multiple times. And finally, in 2006, he said, you're right, you bring them. And then it's like, okay, watch out what you ask for, because you might be asked to deliver. So we reached out to a couple of our partners who are in the corporate agribusiness world and said, we've been given this challenge. We do not want to let it down. Can you help us? So in 2006, at the World Food Prize, it really wasn't even called the Borlaug Dialogue at that time. It was basically the World Food Prize. It was a 2.5-day event. They had brought it back to Des Moines already. We brought in 27 farmers from 16 different countries with the support of these companies.
Yeah.
And our goal was to have farmers in the room. We didn't even think beyond that, right? We just want to have farmers there. So if somebody asked a question, what we ask these farmers to do is challenge the speakers, agree with the speakers, but identify yourself as a farmer. I'm Rosie Laces. I farm in the Philippines. Question. She was one of that was in that group. And Dr. Manjit Misra was at Iowa State University at the time. He was working with the Big Seed program, and we asked him, and he was aware, and one of the people that we had reached out to address this challenge and opportunity. And he said, well, if you're going to bring them all over here, spend one day, bring them together. So that was the first round table. It was 9 to 3 on a Wednesday, the day before the World Food Prize laureate. That's all we did. But we brought these farmers together, and Manjit facilitated conversation. Who are you? What are you doing? And it was really quick to see, even though the diversity of that group, 16 countries, was so clear when you looked at them around the table, the commonalities, dealing with challenges of weather, market access, pricing, cost of inputs, all of it was the same. The particulars were different, but the realities, labor issues, at that point in time as well, were coming up. We just said, okay, we have something here. You can call it accidental, but I think where the brilliance of the GFN board at that time was, they saw an opportunity. And instead of saying, wow, that was cool, they said, what can we do? And so we asked those farmers, what are the outtakes? What did you learn when we brought you in? And there were 3 pieces. Number one was do this again.
Mm.
Bringing farmers together is really important. Number two, connect us. Keep us connected. There's value in us being able to talk together. The beginning of when we added the word network, that connection piece. And the third one was actually a question. Has a farmer ever won the World Food Prize?
Mm.
Answer was no. And the thing came right back. Well, why not? Well, it's Dr. Borlaug, it's research oriented, but we took that to the board of directors. And in 2007, based on those questions, that first global bringing them all together in this one meeting, what's now the GFN Kleckner Global Farm Leader Award rose up. And so that attempt was to raise up, to provide one more platform for a farmer to tell his specific story.
Yeah.
The data. Rosalie Laces, Philippines, was the first one to be honored in 2007 at the World Food Prize, going all the way to just last week, Suichi Tokamoto, Japan, whom I know visited your farm, Miss
Yeah.
Hora. I saw
Yeah.
the photos from 2024. He was the 20th recipient of that
Mm.
award.
Got it. Yeah, Suhichi, my buddy, most famous farmer in Japan, soon to be most famous farmer in the whole world. It's met him when I was out at the GFN roundtable
Mhm.
in London earlier this summer, and yeah, Suhichi was coming to town and come to Iowa, and it sounds like they had a nice week of a couple different tours, but yeah, he was able to come down to my farm, and we talked a lot about, of course, carbon and using data and stuff, telling our stories, and they're working on carbon programs over in Japan right now as well. So it was
Absolutely.
Suhichi, and I think he had 4 or 5 other farmers with him.
Mhm.
But yes, they're working on the same type of stuff in Japan. We were talking about cover crops and some of like the opportunities for cover crops and challenges, but the subsidy programs and stuff being different as
Mhm.
well, and how government is getting involved in trying to drive these efforts. We talked a bunch about our relay cropping that we do,
Yes,
where
yes.
we're harvesting rye over the top of growing soybeans and being able to
Mhm.
diversify our system that way. They just thought that that was the craziest thing. But we were working on like, okay, can we relay crop rice? That's what we were
And,
discussing
and
and trying
isn't
to
that,
figure out like how do
would
we
you,
take what we were doing at our farm to the context of Suhichi's farm in Japan. It was a lot of fun. And we spent the better part of Monday hanging out and had an
that's
awesome day. We
funny,
finally have gotten rain, so we were out digging around, of course, and
in the dirt.
making those guys run the shovel and dig for worms. It was an awesome time.
But I will tell you again, what I'm hearing is that power of connecting farmer to farmer. And
Yeah.
he's the first one to say he had never even heard about no-till cover crops until he joined the GFN in February of 2023. This is new, but it was new information. It was farmers sharing exactly what they were doing on their farm, why they did it, things that they learned that didn't work. There's no reason for someone else to have to go through that same process. If you've already learned something, share not just the things that are positive, but the things that maybe cause you to question some as well. And he's now doing dry direct seeding paddy rice in Japan based on what he saw in Argentina. And I know that what he saw on your farm with relaying those crops is going to show up in what he tries as well. But I'm just fascinated with your thought process of, well, can you put rice into our thing? So again, you pulled
It
from
was
him. And that is a powerful
it,
collaboration is powerful tool.
my story on that when I was with Suhichi over in London here this June and we heard him talking about no-till rice. It blew my mind. Like I didn't
Mhm.
know that that was possible. I've got a couple farmers that we work with that are down like in the Delta and in particular a guy down in Southeast Missouri named Johnny Hunter who's doing no-till like doing a no-till rice but in a what do they call it? Like a furrow irrigated system where
Sure.
they're still using a
But
lot
there's
of water,
channels of water, basically.
channels of water rather than
Mhm.
flooding. And I thought that was just mind blowing of being able to do it in rows and do row rice. And they still use a little bit of like tillage to be able to hip it up and stuff. But I didn't think it was possible to be able to just do it straight up no-till rice. But yeah, Suhichi's pictures were like amazing. I don't know that it was the greatest, most home run ever in year one, but it actually worked. It actually looked like it worked really well. But yeah, just mind blowing that they're
Well,
able to
and
make that kind of
and,
change and for something that I didn't know was even possible at all. But
take
I'm
to
sure
the
that's
next.
what they thought with, even looking back 40, 50 years with no-till corn and stuff too was. It was just
Uh,
completely out of the norm, and now we got a
well,
lot of us doing it.
think about no-till and cover crops in Iowa. I grew up in that northwest corner, and the argument always was, well, we couldn't do cover crops because our season is too short. You know,
Yeah.
the likelihood of snow, how am I going to put that second crop on when there's snow on the ground ready? We have figured out how to do that and that it works, and it's trial and error, but it's also sharing information, what worked in other parts of the world. And I think for Sohichi, clearly the Argentinian farmers specifically had 30 to 40 years of data from their farm. So it wasn't,
Yeah.
it's the data to back up that story, but also the power of taking somebody on the farm and letting them see with their own eyes.
Yeah.
You
And
did
so
that
you
as
guys,
well.
early part of GFN, when you started bringing in people, it was mostly in Iowa, and you
Mhm.
would bring them to Des Moines. When did that change? Because now it's no longer just bring a bunch of global farmers to Des Moines.
No, 2019. And
Okay.
that,
So recent.
and again, we can, yeah, and that was because um we're looking at, well, go back to our mission, amplifying the farmer's voice, getting the farmers out of the audience and onto the platform to be
Mhm.
part of the speaking presentation. And even in Iowa, where you would think this would be the natural place to do, we struggled with getting the farmers actually on the platform. And we decided if we're going to continue to be relegated to the audience, maybe we need to create our own program. Instead of waiting to be invited, invite your own. So we pulled out in 2019, much to the shock of the organizers. Why aren't you bringing these farmers? Said, because this is our mission and we have to be true to our mission, which is to get that farmer's voice out.
Yeah.
What we learned in that reaction was the first time we moved it out was to Simmet. It's the CGIR corn, maize, and wheat research center that's based in Mexico City. We went there. We took 25 farmers into Mexico. And what we learned was the power of intentional development, bringing these farmers together for our program, spending more time together. When we were at the World Food Prize, we were working our events into their schedule. When we pulled ourselves away, we realized that when you control the schedule, you can then control the programming and what you want to do. It was also the first year that we really added a more concentrated version on training for communication skills. How does the farmer tell his story? You know your story. How can you effectively tell that story? Because your story doesn't change if you're talking to a regulator in the United States. How do you tell that story? And clearly in the carbon space that you're working right now, the conversations that you're having with the executive branch and so are very important. But what you're telling them, how you're telling that same story to Suhichi, other farmers, and how you're telling that same story to maybe an extension agent or an ag class or something is different. Story's not changed, but the words you used and how you deliver it might be. And so we brought really uh, intentional communication training into that space. And
Yeah.
now have brought that training internally as well. We were contracting first with an agency, then with Cornell University. They had a program called Alliance for Science, which kind of worked in that space, but they were working specifically on the biotech space. So once again, we saw opportunity, we pulled it internally, brought Gina Gutierrez in on staff, a fellow farmer, met her through GFN as a member, and she's now leading the communication training, again, farmer to farmer, peer-to-peer
Yeah.
knowledge transfer is.
Well, and it was interesting on my side, right? Becoming involved that I do obviously a lot of communication, a lot of like on-farm visits and stuff, and a lot of like policy push and all that. But a lot of other farmers don't necessarily do that. And we're used to just kind of staying in our own lane, staying on our farm and just kind of head down. We're busy and do our thing. So it was interesting for me, right, of looking at like I've gone through a lot of this type of stuff and have a ton of experience doing it, but most farmers don't. So to me, it was interesting watching other people as well and
Mhm.
learning how other people are learning to tell their story
Can I
and
add another layer
get
to
out of
that?
their comfort zone and stuff too, and get out of their
Absolutely.
shell.
But
We
can
definitely
I
saw
add
that in
another
our
layer
group.
to that, Mitchell?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
here's the other thing that as Iowa, US farmers, we also have is that we have a history of understanding that I can go to a regulator, I can go to my congressman, I can go to their staff and meet with them, ask for a meeting, expect to have that meeting, and share with them what's important to me. That actually is quite unique to the
okay.
United States. That does not happen in most countries, including across Europe. They're watching policy decisions that are being made. A fellow member of yours, Paul Temple, is the current board vice chairman for the Global Farmer Network. He's a farmer in the United Kingdom. He's got great experience through the EU Commission. And then, of course, there was Brexit. So Great Britain's all by itself. And he shared with me just yesterday that they just were given an update on the new British budget. And he said they're kicking farmers in the teeth. And so there's going to be the first ever protest in London
Wow.
of farmers on November 19th. That's almost unheard of. But the reality is they're reacting to decisions that have already been made.
Hmm.
Where we have a history in the United States is you still have to react, but knowing that you have a right to talk about what the implications might be if they passed a certain law. We're talking with the carbon space now. You're reaching out to them before those rules are done. You're pushing them to get rules done for certainty. All these pieces, that's a new concept. And so again,
Okay.
that connection to say, you too can be doing this. This is why it's important. It also makes it for a much better trading, farming environment globally for us. If
Understand those implications across, across the world and all that. And I think that's definitely one of the things that where I'm, grateful that I joined the program or was invited to join and was inducted as a member that I didn't really know that, right? And like for my story, like I just hosted Marianette Miller-Meeks here
Exactly.
last week, and Secretary, our Congresswoman, who I just did another quick look. She's currently winning by 400 votes.
Oh, that's better than the
And
six from
she
last
was in a
time.
very tight race
Wow.
last night,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my goodness, like what is going on? But for some reason, Washington County, where we're sitting right now, they didn't put in their vote till I don't know after 11 o'clock or something
Oh,
like that last night.
wow.
So I'm like,
Wow.
what is going on with Washington County? And Washington County really pulled through, and now they haven't called the election yet, but looks like she's in a great spot to win. And I was like, oh yeah, 400 votes, whatever. And talking with my wife, like, geez, that's close. I'm like, well, her first time that she won here a couple cycles ago, she won by
Six,
6 or 7
six,
votes.
yeah,
6 votes. Like,
crazy.
so by 400, we're like, oh, we're totally fine. We'll be okay.
But
But
think about this. You had her on your farm. You've
yes,
met
you
with
just
her. That's
came, hung out with us for an hour, just shooting the crap with her and Secretary Nag.
yeah.
No like video cameras and TV crews in the room. There was a couple folks from like the Cedar Rapids Gazette and stuff like that. But still it was just they wanted to come and talk with a couple farmers, and they had reached out to me, and I'm like, hey, what do you guys want out of this? Because first they're like, hey, we want like 10 farmers. I'm like,
Mhm.
you realize this was, last week. I'm like, you guys realize the election is on Tuesday, and like Marianette doesn't necessarily just have this as a complete home run. Like she needs more than 10 farmer votes that are probably already pretty much on her side, or a lot of us that had already voted. Like you probably better go get like go find some more people. They're like, no, we want to come and talk to a couple farmers, and even if there's nobody in the room, like we want to come do this, we want to come have this conversation. I'm like, that's pretty cool
That's
deal. And
powerful.
to be able to have that type of connection and their openness and willingness to come and hear those stories and talk about all kinds of topics
Mhm.
that we hit on, including trade, of course, and the lack of trade that we've been seeing here recently, or like newer, bigger trade deals and stuff. And
Yeah.
but the bigger thing was family farms and the tax bill uh,
Mhm.
that is coming up, or that's going to be due to sunset in 2025 without taking action, which would includes provisions around stepped up basis and death tax and some of these things that
Mhm.
could be absolutely a killer to American family farm
Yeah.
if it's not done correctly. But yeah, that's crazy that for me to not know anything different, right? Of being able to be
Mhm.
connected with these folks, be able to have them. Marianette's been to she's come to our summer field day at least 3 or 4 times that she
Fabulous.
just comes and stops by and gives a little spiel. And now, yeah, an event like this, like I guess, yeah, it's a eye-opening thing that we need to be very grateful for that connection,
Mhm.
for that opportunity that a lot of times we probably take it for granted here as Americans as well.
That is so true. And I think it's an important example for us to share, to talk about that reality, because that is a surprising, that whole concept is almost hard for a lot of farmers in this world to do it. Some of them were in your, I think Mary was in your class, and she's like, I didn't have the confidence that my story would even matter, or that what I've learned on my farm matters to them. And seeing that confidence build up when we're talking about the fact that we do work in and live in a global environment.
Yeah,
What happens in the Philippines and Japan, those decisions are going to directly impact what you're doing in continuum ag,
sure.
in that carbon space, because pressure from some of these other parts of the world are going to inform also the decisions that our administration makes here in the United States. And so having farmers understand, number one, the power of their voice, but also can speak up to their own regulators and the people who are running in their legislatures, the Congress, the politicians in their space, so that we have a more unified global view on what we're doing. There's a lot of people calling for environmental sustainability, and now it's
Yeah.
regenerative and carbon and all these pieces that you're doing. But farmers talking about, what does that actually look like on the farm? How do I know what I have? This is the value proposition I bring to this table. By the way, agriculture is a big part of the solution for these challenges that we're talking about. But how do we make that case? And so I think what you're doing in Continue Ag is a very important part of that. And it goes back to the power of telling your story, of
Yeah.
knowing your value, of being able to back that up. Your stories are refutable, and then you share it.
Well, and what was fun on it, and to back up a little bit, my story of how I got involved too was with Delaney Howell, who
Mhm.
helps on a lot of the marketing and social media stuff. She's from right here in Southeast Iowa, and her husband is now our vice president
Yes,
of
there's a
sales.
connection.
Which actually, the quick story on that is when we were in London on the bus riding around was when I was, Delaney's got her own business, and we use a similar business management program called
Mhm.
EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. So we were just talking shop, and I had shared that, we need a new VP of sales, and we've had gone through some issues with our previous one and stuff. She's like, well, Blaine needs to like figure out a different job. He's starting to look at different stuff. I'm like, well, shoot, that'd be awesome.
Hello.
Blaine, we've worked with in the past. I've known him for years. Like, he would be amazing. And now, because of that conversation and hanging out on the bus, we opened up a conversation with Blaine to join our team as VP of sales. And now he's been with us for a couple months, and it's been amazing.
Fabulous.
So, but the real story, Mary, I don't know if I'm shared with you, like Delaney definitely twisted my arm to go to this thing. At first, I
No,
was I
I
was
was
a no.
well aware of that.
I was definitely a no. I was like, I travel so much. I have so many different things going on. It was right during like we were crazy busy with it was huge sales. I think it was the week that we were in London was the biggest week of sales that Continuum has ever done. And I was out of the country trying to still like help to manage stuff, but luckily, my
Good.
team is amazing and pulled through. But I was like, gosh, Delaney, I don't know what you're getting me into, but I said yes, and it was amazing. And part of it just to be able to be in a room with, I don't know, there was 10 or 12 of us. I think you guys have been able to understand,
Yeah,
like, kind of right size, how many people should be in the room and
yeah.
how do you do it. But from, anywhere from a small, organic farmer that's got a couple of hoop houses and like less than 1 acre telling a story directly to these consumers to our buddy Antonio down in Brazil,
So,
who was the stinking uh
Minister of
Secretary of
Agriculture.
Minister of Ag for Brazil. Like,
Yeah,
like that's crazy that
yeah.
like the diversity of that group was just incredible, but especially hanging out with Antonio of what we were just talking about with telling our story, and of course the Brazilian farmers being really pinned as deforesting and ruining the environment and the rainforest and all this stuff. And Antonio is like, gosh, they're battling kind of from behind, right? That there's already
Mhm.
this stigma
Yes.
on them, but it's very much impacting policy too, is what I was getting to. That there is mandate now in the EU that they cannot bring in product from deforested lands. And it's
Exactly.
impacting American farmers now as well, that
Yep.
there's premium programs available that you can get paid a premium on your soybeans if you go through the paperwork and stuff to prove that this soybean was not grown on deforested ground. So and of course, it's the European rule makers that are looking at Brazil,
Hmm.
looking at South America as a reason for this policy, but it's impacting the American farmers as well. And Antonia's like, we're not deforesting. Was there some of that? And can we recognize that?
Early
Sure.
days. Yep.
But there's so much regulation on it now and mandate that like it's just not the reality anymore. But they didn't get ahead of it to tell
Hmm.
their story. And now they're
Hmm.
fighting from behind and it's impacting farmers all around the world.
And I think that, and echoing that was the biotechnology piece,
Mm,
and we talk about why did the world turn against that very important technology that as a farmer you knew why you were using it. To your point, you're busy doing what you need to do for
yeah.
your farm, right? So the whole thought that well now I have to tell everybody why I'm doing it. Oh, but no, but yes. And that again, a lot of it, we're sitting on a webinar where
Yeah.
you can be wherever you are and do that. Our ability to pick up information. Google has been the most prolific information source globally for a long time. It is this year, we are told, being replaced by YouTube. If you want information, you go to YouTube. How do I tie my bow tie? How do I fix my truck? How do we do these things? We go to YouTube to learn things. Unfortunately, all of these, or I'm not, I use the word unfortunately, but the reality is they use algorithms that they create that are going to drive you to things. So if you're looking for deforestation, unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of stories about the negative things. And so
Sure.
the importance of putting out not just saying it, but putting it in spaces where people are looking for their information, which is why what Suhichi, let's take Suhichi Tokamudo again,
Yeah.
introduce us to a whole new platform. He's done many things in his life, clearly involved in agriculture and a leading farmer in that space, but he's a singer-songwriter. I will tell you, in my wildest dreams, I never thought about using music and music
Yeah.
videos to tell a farmer's story. Not only does he do it, he does it with such fervor and passion. And there is a whole, it's not just a generation, there is a group of people who would have never thought about where their food came or how it was grown or why farmers are doing it, except that they saw a music video by a farmer playing a Stratovision up on top of a tractor in Brazil. Go
Yeah.
figure. But
That
it's
was amazing.
stunning. And it tells a story that that's important to share, but it's finding it a platform where people are looking for that information. And that helps build it, bring it up to a space where we can inform in different ways.
And Tucci's got it. Like, there's no way when they were working on the World Food Prize stuff that they would ever think that there was going to be a farmer come and sing at the World Food Prize or like any type of event like that in the world. Like,
Exactly.
there's got to be no way that any farmer has ever gotten up and like sang in front of all these people wearing suits. And so Ichi's wearing this like his farmer garb and just wailing it. It was
Three,
amazing. Was that
three Three
there's a
African presidents. Three African presidents there,
oh
ambassadors
my
from
God.
all over the world. They're all in the front line. The World Food Prize laureate Carrie Fowler, Jonathan is from the UK. They're all there. And Suhichi sang, he sang it in Japanese with the transcription, which they asked him to do, but he had an immediate standing ovation.
Yeah,
Every person stood up in that
it
room
was
because
amazing.
they understood they just saw something really special.
The video for it is awesome. And I don't know if you guys have it on your YouTube yet or
It
somebody
will be.
got it posted, but we need to share that thing. So it was awesome. Was it did they have that? Was it in the Capitol building or
Yes, in
okay, I
the
thought
Capitol,
so. Yeah, so
in
it
the
was
House
in
chamber.
one of the chambers of Congress. But
Mhm.
they had some banners and stuff of for World Food Prize. But I'm like, I
Yeah,
saw the video, I'm like, that's in one of the chambers of
yeah.
Congress.
It's an invitation only event. It was the high of the people who had come to Des
It was
Moines, Iowa
awesome.
for this global event.
Yeah,
And there is a farmer from Japan who was their main entertainment. And it was stunning. And it
no, it's
made
so
an
cool.
impression because The other piece is, okay, did that matter, right? Well, great entertainment, but did it matter? And the number of people who came up to me, but I watched them go up to Suhichi and the other farmers you mentioned, there were 4 other farmers from Japan who came basically they paid their way to support and to cheer him on. And they
Yeah.
got to witness something that was very special. But the people were just saying, never expected it. What an amazing story. How else can we tell this ag farm technology story? And he opened a lot of eyes, but he also opened some opportunities. And
100%. Well, just doing something very memorable, right?
yes,
That is something that people are going to be able to go and talk about. And of course, most of folks like he's singing in Japanese. Yeah, they have the words there,
the
but
words, it was,
still, that wasn't the point of what he was talking about. It was the passion there to be able to share your story and be able to advocate for global agriculture. That is really
well, and
the
I will
thing.
add, especially when you were talking about Antonio and the deforestation concerns, uh, and people who have been traveled into Asia, the Southeast, et cetera, Japan very specifically, there is a very close connection to nature. And I think the tenets of his song is how, as a farmer, he works with nature to protect
Mhm.
nature, to support nature. And that is a message that gets lost. I saw the pictures of you and the farmers digging in the soil and pulling up those worms. Okay, that's nature in its purest form.
Yeah,
But most people they don't think or they don't see that visual. So he was able to, through his song, but also through that video, show how important it is
yeah,
as a farmer to sustain the land, that we're not here to just rip it up and tear it off, that if we're not working with the land, then you'll not be a sustainable farmer because you're not gonna be able to continue to do it. You'll lose the most
for
important
sure.
asset you have. And so again, another layer of storytelling through photos.
And as farmers, we get that, but we don't always tell that story the right way. And that's again like why I wanted to bring this back and have you on. I've our goalpost, our scoring system, at least as row crop farmers in
Mhm.
Iowa, our
Mhm.
scoring system and our method of being able to tell our story has always been with yield,
Yeah.
and that's it. And this carbon intensity thing that we've got, it's the first time that there's a new scoreboard where we can actually have some real data behind what we are doing to tell our story in an additional light, not just with the pictures and the videos and trying to get people to the farm and touching the heartstrings, but now with some real data too, which
Mhm.
especially on policy, to influence policy, you gotta have data to really be able to do it. And yeah, we've scored over 330 million bushels of grain already through our system and found that those farmers have a carbon footprint that's about two-thirds lower than what the government believes them to be.
And that
So,
is important information. It's important to share. It's important to be able to back it up. And so that's where your data becomes such an
so
important tool.
for sure. And looking at it as, okay, there's a carrot for it now, but most people don't know what we're doing. And in ag, we could get the stick, like our buddy Antonio is suffering now of having to fight against this negative stigma. Well, our policymakers as well, the Department of Energy, they believe that farmers have this large carbon footprint, but in reality, we're doing significantly better than what they believe us to be. And we got to get ahead of this so that we don't get the stick as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
So
And
that's
the carbon space, the methane emission space,
yeah.
livestock is under attack globally. And again, rice production. We've got a farm, you have a fellow GFN member, Shakar Balsfeld from India, who's doing dry seeding rice as well, also rice. And what they have found out, again, data supporting it up, is that one of the largest proliferators of methane, greenhouse gas emissions actually is paddy rice because you've got standing water. And
Yeah.
when water stands, the methane comes up. But when you take the water out of that process, and you can back up the fact, and so metrics matter. If
Yeah.
they give the proof, it's the proof of concept.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is important.
For that, but for on decision making too. And a shout out to my buddy David who's on and he was part of my group. He's from Paraguay. He's on our call here now, and I'm sure a lot of the other names I don't
Oh,
recognize.
fabulous.
I'm sorry, but people from all over the world listening to this. But David and I were able to connect on here's how we're using data just from an agronomic perspective too, to just improve our day-to-day operations, control what we can control. That's what this all boils down to. And what farmers really want to do long term is be resilient, be economically sustainable, and environmental sustainability can definitely go hand in hand with that, but be able to sustain our families and do what we want to be able to do. So it really is very holistic, I think, in how it all comes together. But
Yeah.
um, Mary, we are out of time.
No, it goes fast.
We haven't even gotten, I've only gotten through a couple of your things. Oh, sure, we have our whole, here's our group right here. Um,
Yes,
and
there you
just
are.
so many of the rest of our most recent group. Here's Antonio's in the middle here with the
Mhm.
mustache. David here with the hat.
And
To
the
the
attitude. I love that
Yeah,
pose.
I love it. That's so cool. Um, and just so many of these others as well. Like and Hyun that's on the far left,
Mhm.
farming in Vietnam,
Vietnam.
and she oversees 700 employees on
Yeah.
this banana farm. That just blew my mind. Like, and
Yeah.
she's like, I forget how old. She's like 32 years old,
Yeah,
like
she's
about
young.
the same
She's
age
young.
as
And she
me.
came out of the banking finance industry.
Yeah, so just so stinking smart. And
Yeah.
now she's overseeing 700 employees on this
On Unify.
banana farm. It blew my mind. I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah.
But
No, it's huge
okay.
value in all in sharing all of these things together. So there's our goals. We're doing this.
Yes.
We're doing it right now.
And okay, so we gotta work towards wrapping up. This is obviously you and I could talk on this for hours and hours, but I think just the amazing story of being able to amplify that farmer voice, what these people started off doing, just going so much bigger than what they ever imagined and continuing to go. And for people that are on or within our network, what is the current status of farmers that are inspired by this that should look at joining and stuff here too? Maybe wrap us up kind of with that. Like, how do
Absolutely.
people follow along with GFN or help on this work, or yeah, maybe apply to be involved themselves?
There's multiple layers to be involved. Number one, as a farmer, what you're doing locally is important. Whether you belong to something like Global Farmer Network or not, telling your story locally, regionally, wherever your opportunities are, is important. As we say yes when given the opportunity. That's fundamental. If you're interested in being a member of the Global Farmer Network, it is invitation only, but that first process for everybody is fill out a nomination form. You go to our website, www.globalfarmernetwork.org. It just says there's a nomination form. You just fill it out, you submit it online, and it goes in the next class, the next group of cohorts. Mitchell, you were in 2024, the 2025 group will be selected into February. So we're accepting nominations right now. That class actually is we're going to gather them together after doing some virtual communication training. We will bring in San Jose, Costa Rica in June. And we are going to be on the campus of ICA, which is I'm going to read the whole word because it's the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, an
Wow.
amazing organization that covers South, Latin America, Caribbean, all in agriculture institutes. Great partners and collaborators. So we're going to be bringing ourselves together there. If you want to just kind of follow what we're doing, Facebook, LinkedIn, X. I always want to say Twitter, X.
Yeah.
Following the website, there's an opportunity to sign up for a newsletter that comes electronically just once a week. So we're not going to fill your program. And I think go to the last side. I'm thinking, wondering if my address is on there now. My address,
I think this is
go
your
to
last. I
Mitchell.
think this is
Yeah,
your last
thank
slide.
you.
But if
So go
if
to
people want to
Mitchell.
connect with you, obviously they can hit me up and we'll
Absolutely.
connect
Share
over.
my
We'll
email
put
and we'll be happy to bring you
we'll
in.
put some stuff in the show notes and stuff here too. But
Very good.
yeah, such a cool deal, and definitely jealous on Costa Rica. London was pretty awesome, but I
Well,
was in
then,
Costa Rica back in high school,
well, let
and
me break some news to you.
oh
This
man,
so now wasn't supposed to do this till December, but I'm treating you as special.
oh
So
good,
remember I told you that this started in February of 2000.
yep.
So 2025 is the 25th anniversary of the Global Farmer Network. So in December, we'll be announcing, but in December of 2025, we are going to be hosting a GFN mobilization program open to all members of the GFN in South Africa.
Oh, I love
Put it
South
on your
Africa.
calendar now.
I've
So,
been to South Africa twice,
and it will
and
be, it's
yeah, I
an
haven't
open
been for.
invitation to GFN members only. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to connect well beyond the group of cohorts with other like-minded farmers from around the world. So
South
FYI.
Africa is pretty awesome. I might have
Okay.
to. All right, all right. We'll talk some more on this, Mary.
All
Anyway,
right.
okay, this has been amazing, Mary. Thanks so much for taking the time, and for everyone that's been on. We talk about telling our story at Continuum. We want to help to do that. You can get your CI score for free at topsoil.ag is where you really start. And the opportunity is to tell that story within biofuels and stuff. That's where the real short-term opportunity is. Our next webinar, we're going to talk exactly that. I've got a CEO from Western New York Energy coming on. They're an ethanol plant that we've been working with for a while now in New York. Tim Winters, very, very thoroughly in depth in decarbonizing their ethanol plant, working with their farmers. We're doing a pilot project there. So definitely a key one for especially for farmers that do have an opportunity to maybe monetize their carbon intensity here in the US with these biofuel markets. Other than that, lots of material online. We'll get this recording posted on our YouTube channel and on our podcast here soon. We got to keep telling this story. And yeah, Mary, super
Exactly.
inspiring here. It's been amazing to have you on. I knew it was going to be awesome. And just kudos to everything you guys done. And I'm definitely very happy to be a member.
We're
Happy I
glad to have
let
you.
Delaney twist my arm and Mark Heckman and these guys. Happy to glad that they twisted my arm and was able to be part of it. It's a very, very cool deal and uh, pretty
And
awesome.
and I think
Pretty
it's
awesome.
for all of us. It's like we all have our individual work products, the things that drive us. But understanding that when you're willing to collaborate, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, even more can be done. And the value that we get from it as members, that knowing an Antonio, knowing a Rosalie, knowing these people and learning from them and sharing with them that's just the beginning of the pathway.
Yeah.
So the Global Farmer Network it's a membership organization. So you get to come to these cohorts, but you are a member for life. And that those relationships and what you do with them is up to us. But again, being part of something that can really ultimately change your life and change other lives as well is something that I'm proud of and that drives our passion. So
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity.
Incredible. Mary, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you here sometime soon. But thanks for taking the time. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time and have a good day.